This is the story of how God provided for his people in ways that seemed impossible. Stop scrolling. You won't want to miss this. Think about this. Have you ever been in a place where hope seems lost? Where every possible solution feels like it's out of reach? This is exactly how a widow in Zarephath must have felt when she met Elijah, the prophet of God. But what happened next would change everything. Let me take you back to ancient times, to the dry and dusty roads of Zarephath in Israel. The story begins during a terrible famine in the land. Rain had not fallen for years, and every plant, every crop dried up. People were starving, and their spirits were crushed under the weight of despair. It was in this atmosphere of hopelessness that God spoke to Elijah. "Arise, go to Zarephath, which belongs to Sidon, and dwell there. Behold, I have commanded a widow there to provide for you." Elijah didn't question God. Even though it didn't make sense for a widow, someone with very little, to provide in a time of scarcity, Elijah obeyed. He journeyed to Zarephath, and there he saw her, the widow. She was gathering sticks to make the final meal for herself and her son. She had only a handful of flour in a jar and a little oil in a jug. After this meal, she believed they would die. Elijah called out to her and asked for water. She turned to fetch it, and as she walked away, he added, "And bring me a morsel of bread in your hand." Surprised and probably even offended, the widow stopped. She turned and said, "As the Lord your God lives, I have nothing baked, only a handful of flour in a jar and a little oil in a jug. Now I am gathering a couple of sticks to prepare it for myself and my son, that we may eat and die." Imagine the pain in her voice. This wasn't anger, it was resignation. Life had been cruel, and now it seemed it was over. But pay attention to what Elijah said next. "Do not fear," he assured her. "Go and do as you have said. But first, make me a little cake of it and bring it to me, and afterward make something for yourself and your son." Now, that might sound audacious. Who would ask such a thing from a woman who had so little? But Elijah wasn't done. He continued, "For thus says the Lord, the God of Israel, the jar of flour shall not be spent, and the jug of oil shall not be empty, until the day that the Lord sends rain upon the earth." Can you imagine the decision she had to make at that moment? Would she trust Elijah's God, or would she cling tightly to the little she had left? With courage, she chose to trust. She baked a small cake for Elijah, and what happened after was nothing short of miraculous. The jar of flour did not run out, and the jug of oil did not go empty. Day after day, there was food for Elijah, the widow, and her son. God provided abundantly in a situation of complete scarcity, and not just for one day or 1 week, but until the rains finally came back to the land. This story is a beautiful reminder that God can provide in ways that are beyond our understanding. It teaches us to trust in Him, even when circumstances seem dire. The widow's faith and obedience turned her hopeless situation into one filled with God's provision and grace. So, the next time you face a challenge that feels impossible, remember this story. Trust in God, even when the resources around you seem scarce. Like the widow of Zarephath, you might just witness a miracle that reminds you of His love and power.